Hi everyone, Tyler Mannion here, NBC and IFBB Pro League Vice President, and this will be your Arnold Classic recap for Open Men. So obviously I think we had a very close show. We had a great top three, and we're going to go through with Nick and Andrew pose by pose and kind of break down what I personally saw at the show. So I think you can start off with Andrew and Nick. Overall, I think Nick's conditioning he brought was right on the money here. Again, I think he brought conditioning just like how he did to Pittsburgh last year. So when Nick brings conditioning like this, it's very, very impressive. Now, in this lineup, when you compare him to Andrew and Hadi, Hadi obviously has very good conditioning from the front, as always, through the abdomen, the chest, the waist, and then quads and legs from the front as well. From the side and especially from the back, I thought Hadi was a little off at this show. Really, especially from the back, a little soft through the back, definitely soft through the hamstrings and the glutes. For Andrew, I think Andrew's conditioning was solid, but not amazing. Again, from the front, you see detail and striations. I actually thought his conditioning from the side and from the back was pretty solid, seeing it in person. Andrew obviously needs a little bit more to his legs, and especially you can see to his hamstrings. And I feel like that's why you see, even when Andrew's in solid conditioning, it just doesn't look as crisp or as crazy deep as someone like Nick, for example, whose hamstrings and legs, especially from the back, are very, very crazy, very muscular, and very wide. So I think that contributes to how conditioning looks on a body. And for me, overall, Andrew's conditioning was probably pretty similar to what he brought to the Olympia. I still think Andrew's conditioning can probably be a little bit better, but obviously they don't want to sacrifice muscle and fullness by just chasing conditioning, which in the past he's done that and then become kind of thin and stringy overall throughout his whole entire body. So trying to find that balance. Now, again, when you look at both guys, I think for Andrew, his main weakness is the legs. The legs need to come up a little bit. But I feel like from the front, his legs have come up. His quads actually look very solid from the front, and overall, it still flows with his physique very well. From the side, as you can see in the videos, he's posing a lot better. You're actually seeing the side leg much better, the separation between the quads and the hamstrings, and overall, the flow of the poses look much better on Andrew from the side than they have in the past. But for him, I would say bringing up the legs overall, still adding a little bit more to the front, that's only going to help his already very, very strong front poses, but it's going to help his side poses and his back poses if he can add more leg width from the back and obviously more leg width from the side as well. So that's Andrew's, I say, main weakness. Conditioning solid, but not to the amazing tier that I would say Nick's was. Now we go to Nick. For Nick, his number one main weakness obviously is the waist and the waistline. Now for me, on Friday, I think Nick did not do a good job at all of controlling his waist and his stomach. So when you're breathing through your stomach, especially Nick, honestly, for Nick, I don't think he was really controlling it at all. Even walking out and walking around on stage, he was just leaving his stomach hanging out. And when you're doing this and going through the poses, this definitely hurts you. We've seen it in the past at many different shows. I mean, it's happened at the Olympia before with guys that were in first and second place. So for Nick, his waistline also to me was wider than it has been in the past. But for Nick, I feel like his waistline changes sizes a lot. As you see in Pittsburgh last year, I think it was arguably the tightest his waist has ever looked. So the smallest his waistline has ever looked. At the Olympia, his waist looked very, very wide. This one, I would say his waist did not look as wide as it did at the Olympia, but it was still wide. The obliques were wide. The waistline itself was wide. And when you're standing between two guys that have great waist and also good tapers, that kind of throws off your balance from the front. Also for Nick, I still think Nick is a little bit upper body dominant from the front as well. So his quads, I think, improved. His quads look great. And I think it really comes down to what the waistline looks like on him to make his poses from the front flow a lot better. So let's get into it. Front double bicep, I think that's a clear Andrew pose. Andrew flows very, very well from the front. Obviously, he has great arms, lats flaring out wide, waist is tapered in and small. Go down to his legs, and like I said, I feel like he's improved his leg width from the front and also his development to his quads. I think the pose is a very, very strong pose. For Nick, I felt like he hit the front double obviously better than he did at this past Olympia. Main thing for me still is bringing in that waistline and making the flow and the balance better between his upper and his lower body. Arms are obviously awesome, some of the top in the whole entire pro league, if not the top. But overall, when you look at the pose from head to toe, I gave it to Andrew very clearly to make it 1-0 Andrew. Next up is the front lat spread. Obviously, this is Nick's, I would say, weakest pose. I actually do think he improved on the way he hit it at this show compared to shows in the past. But again, you still need to see more taper. The waistline needs to be in a little bit more. The upper to lower body balance could still be a little bit better. The chest could still be a little bit thicker and fuller as well in this pose. Andrew, one of his strongest poses. Upper body looks great. You see, again, arms and shoulders look great. Thickness and detail to the chest looks awesome. Midsection is great. Go down to the lower body. I think it still flows very well with his upper body, but could still use a little bit more size to the lower body here. But again, very, very, for me, clear pose for Andrew to make it 2 poses to 0. Next, we get into the side chest pose. Now, for me, I think when you're really looking at this pose is closer between these two than it was in the past. For Nick, it's always been a very strong pose. I still think he can use a little bit more thickness to his chest in this pose. And then, of course, I think more on Friday than for Saturday for me. His stomach control needs to be better on this pose as well. We can still see through to the waistline and the stomach on this pose. For me, Nick didn't really do a good job on Friday of holding this in. I think on Saturday, he did a much better job holding it in throughout all the times we took them through. Side leg is crazy on Nick. Conditioning is crazy. Overall muscle is crazy. So again, very strong pose for Nick. Still a couple more little things he can do to make this really hard for anybody to stand next to. For Andrew, he poses this a lot better, as I said previously. For him, he needs more size to the side leg, but upper body wise, with shoulder to shoulder, thickness through the shoulders and the chest. Obviously, the waistline is good. I think his upper body looks now very, very strong in this pose and can really go up against anybody's upper body in this side chest pose. Now, the lower body needs to come up so the pose looks more balanced. And also, obviously, I think the more muscle he gets in those legs, the deeper his conditioning is going to look to make him look more conditioned in the lower body. But again, for me, very clear pose for Nick to make it 2 poses to 1. Next up is the back double bicep. For this pose, Nick's back double bicep looks great. Arms and shoulders are awesome. Lower body is insane. Detail, width, conditioning. Back is great. Has very nice shape to it. For Nick, I think the closer up you get to him, the more you can see that his back still needs to add a little bit more depth to it, a little bit more thickness. He just doesn't have that quite same thickness. You can even see on Andrew's back here, you can see the thickness to it. Now, Nick, the lines are everywhere they should be. It still shows some depth to it, which makes the pose very, very strong, but he could still use just a little bit more thickness back there. And you could see it even more on the next pose, the back lat spread pose. You need to see more of that depth and thickness in the back itself. But again, overall, extremely strong pose for him. Andrew, back has definitely improved in the upper body. Arms and shoulders obviously are great as well. Go down to the lower body, and this is where he needs to make his biggest improvement. More leg width, more leg detail, and just overall more leg size. And obviously, like I said, deeper conditioning to the legs here. So very strong pose for Nick, making it 2 poses to 2. Next up is the back lat spread pose. So for me, this pose is a little bit closer, obviously, than the back double bicep pose is between the two. Again, Andrew's legs are the weakness. They need to be brought up. But when you see the lat spread out, Nick's lats now have good width. I think he hits the pose very well, but you can still see it can add a little bit more depth and thickness to that back. That's only going to make this pose pop way more. And if he's able to do that, again, he's going to turn this pose into a pose that it's going to be hard for anybody to stand next to with him. But you can see Andrew's thickness in his back in this pose. I think it looks very good. Obviously, his waistline looks very good in this pose as well. So upper body, I think, hangs with Nick's pretty well. Just the lower body is where he falls behind. So again, pose the Nick, making it 3 poses to do. Now we get into the side tricep pose. So this pose, I think, is a pose that is much, much closer than maybe some people think. Andrew hits this much better now. You see the width from shoulder to shoulder. One thing that Andrew really has on a lot of guys is that thickness through the chest. You see that thickness through the chest. Obviously, you see great abs and nice detail in the waist. And because of the way he's hitting it and the improvements that he has made to his legs, I feel like this pose flows much, much better than it did before. And I think the upper and the lower body show more balance to me than it does in the side chest for him. So for me, I think this is now a very strong pose for Andrew. He's improved it a lot. Again, improving the legs is going to make it look even better, but I think it looks very good. Now for Nick. Nick's side tricep pose is obviously pretty unique. I think he is hitting it a little bit better than before. However, again, on Friday, the waist control in this pose is super, super important because the waistline is obviously more exposed. For me on Friday, I gave this pose to Andrew. I think that Nick wasn't controlling his stomach at all. And even when he would flex the abs and bring the waist in, the first thing he was doing was distending the waist and then blowing all the air out and bringing it in. So for me, I just don't think that that looks good. I also think that Nick can add a little bit more thickness to his chest in this pose as well. I don't think he has the same width that Andrew does in his side tricep pose. So on Saturday night, I think that because Nick did a lot better of a job controlling his midsection, that I could see this pose flipped, because actually I think on Saturday night, Andrew in the side tricep pose specifically was having trouble really flexing his abs and keeping his stomach as tight as it needed to be. So for me on Saturday night, I gave this pose to Nick. So the posing score for Friday for me would be 3 poses to 3 at this point, and on Saturday would be 4 poses to 2 for Nick. Next pose is the abdominal and thigh pose. I think this pose is an extremely strong pose for Andrew. Again, when his legs are facing straight forward and he's flexing his quads to the front, you can see the feathering in the quads as well. So the conditioning that Andrew brings from the front, obviously, like I said, better than the side and the back. I think it's extremely strong. Look at the waistline, look at his abs. Everything is symmetrical. Everything flows extremely well from head to toe. For Nick obviously has deep and blocky abs, but for me, you can see that the balance between his upper and the lower body is just still not quite there. It doesn't flow that well. And also the waistline, especially his obliques, look very wide in this pose. And when you see his waistline and how wide it is next to Hadi and Andrew hitting this pose, that's where you see the huge difference. So for me, very, very clear pose to Andrew, which would make it on Friday 4 poses to 3 for Andrew, and on Saturday it would now be 4 poses to 3 for Nick. Next up is the most muscular pose. So I think this was a very, very interesting pose at this show. Everybody knows that Nick has a very strong most muscular pose. However, I also think Andrew's most muscular is very, very strong as well now. You can see they both have great arms and shoulders. I think Nick's chest is flatter and doesn't show as much detail as Andrew's chest does. Andrew's chest is fuller. Andrew's chest has more detail. Upper body-wise, go down into the waistline. Obviously, Andrew's waistline is better than Nick's. Now go into the lower body. Both guys have continued to work on their quads from the front. Now, when Andrew and Nick, it happened a lot, I think, on both nights. So we see them hit 2 different variations of the most muscular. Nick hits his hands clasped together most muscular. Andrew hits his straight on, legs right under him, with hands right over top of each other most muscular. It's very, very close between them. Then they both switch off to 2 different poses. Andrew's is kind of similar. However, he goes and extends his front leg out, so you can see the feathering and how his quads, the conditioning through his quads. Now Nick goes and switches to his hands on his waist. Obviously, in this pose, it turns into a very, very dominating pose and victory in this pose for Andrew, in my opinion, because Nick exposes his weakness, his waistline. We're not seeing the full thickness of his arms and his shoulders, and the flow and everything to his physique just isn't there. He also loses chest thickness when he does this as well. Andrew, I think, accentuates all of his strengths when he goes into his second variation, and of course makes his lower body, to me, look even better than it does in the first variation. So for me, when evaluating the most muscular pose, I personally preferred Andrew's most muscular on both nights. So on Friday, this would make it 5 to 3 for Andrew. On Saturday, it would make it 4 to 4, poses tied. Now, on Saturday, who would I score it for, Andrew or Nick? Since for me personally, there was obviously a couple clear poses for each, and then a couple close poses for both. For me, looking head to toe, looking overall at balance, symmetry, proportions, conditioning, I think Nick takes the conditioning factor. I think Andrew takes the balance, the symmetry, and the proportion factor. So for me, going on the tiebreaker, I lean towards Andrew on Saturday night. I actually think both guys came back better on Saturday night. That's my opinion. I think Nick looked better just because his control of his stomach was much better on Saturday than it was on Friday, and I think that helped him out. Conditioning-wise, I think this also helped everything pop just a little bit better to me. So even though the conditioning difference for Nick wasn't that drastic between the first and the second nights, I personally liked his second night look better. For Andrew, I actually also liked his second night look better. However, like I said, he made a little mistake in that side tricep pose, and I think because Nick improved in the posing and presentation aspect, I flipped that pose. So for me, overall, Andrew won this show. I do think it was very, very close. I think for Nick, it was a really, really good showing, and basically, if he can just bring that waistline in a little bit more, it shows that he's a threat to beat any of the guys in the pro league right now. So again, Andrew, amazing job, great victory. I think he's on the right track as well. He's definitely making improvements to his lower body. I have a feeling he's going to make some more going into the Olympia this year. And for Nick, I have a feeling that his waistline at the Olympia is going to look even better than it did here. And obviously, he proved that he can bring that trademark conditioning again.